Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we are going to be talking about Dear Esther. The story in Dear Esther is rather confusing, and it's pretty much open to interpretation. The player might be the narrator, they might be Esther, they might be some unknown inhabitant of another island or the mainland. Other characters get mentioned in this, and they all tend to blend together as the game goes on, and also as the narrator's health deteriorates over the course of the game. The game takes place on an abandoned island off the coast of Scotland. It's a very rocky island that was sparsely populated in the past. There is some kind of unseen character, maybe a person, maybe Esther, I don't know, but there's some unseen entity on the island. You occasionally get glimpses of it, but you never get a really good look at it. And if you're just playing through the game the first time, you might completely miss the thing entirely. You hear a lot about one inhabitant of the island who tried to make a go of it as a sheep herder, and you also hear about their death. Then you hear about someone named Donnelly who mapped out this island. You don't read about it, but you hear about a book that was checked out. It might have been in the past by the narrator, it might have been recently. You don't really get a timeline in this, so a lot of this is just guessing. You try to figure out for yourself just when everything took place in this game, who all of these people actually are. It's kind of interesting from that standpoint. Some of the island's history is also given to you through the narration. And, the more you explore the island, the more you really get about this story. However, you don't get everything on the first playthrough, and it can take multiple playthroughs to get just the whole narrative put together. It's an interesting way of telling a story, and I kind of like it. There's also a lot of visual storytelling in this. Someone at some point has gone through with a bunch of like fluorescent blue paint and left messages for you. They've also put a whole bunch of like electrical schematics and chemical equations up on various walls throughout this entire island. You'll also find them in caves, especially when you get into the cave section of the game. It's fascinating. Some of the words are easy to make out, some of them are not so easy. And some of them can only be viewed from a distance, so while you're walking past them, you might not get the whole message right away. And then when you get up on a cliff and turn back around, you can read the whole thing. Much of the narration comes in the form of these letters that the narrator is sending to Esther, his dead wife. I'm assuming it's his dead wife. You also get some talk of a car accident, and much later in the game, I say much later, it's not a very long game, you end up in this underwater scene where there appears to be a car crash, but just with the game's graphics at that point, it's not entirely clear. I'm assuming it's the same car accident that the narrator talks about, but who knows? Everything in this is rather vague and very open to interpretation. I do like the story. It's much more interesting than what I was expecting. And it's more interesting what isn't told to the player throughout all of this. You don't really know who you're supposed to be. You don't really know who all of these people are. You're not really sure how all of this is connected. And the timeline is just all kinds of messed up. It's really like you're listening to somebody descending into madness as they're telling you all of these things. Like memories are just coming back to them and they're regurgitating them back to you as quickly as they can, nothing's in order, and it's all up to you to kind of make some sense of it. Part of me feels like this is one of those games where you're supposed to just discuss the ending or discuss the entire game and come to your own conclusions. The gameplay in this is probably the biggest weak spot in the game. This is a walking simulator in every aspect of the genre. There are no enemies, there are no puzzles, there's nothing for you to do except for explore this island. You control your character's movement, you control the camera, and you can zoom in and out of things. Or in and out on things, sorry. That's it. This was quite the departure from many of the other games that, I've played and also many of the other games that came out around the time that this was released. It's kind of a relaxing game in many ways. You're just looking at this beautiful scenery and you're wandering through some pretty impressive looking things. It's a very beautiful game to just look at, and that does a good job of distracting you from the fact that nothing's really happening. You're just going from point A to point B, getting little bits of a story, and if you explore in the right spots, then you get a little bit more of what's happening. And then you come to the end, which I'll talk about after I talk about the graphics a little bit. I really love the way this game looks. Everything in it just looks really cool. The grass, the outdoors, it all looks just very calming and relaxing. Even when you're exploring this cave and you're trying to figure out how to get out of the cave, it's still really beautiful with all the fluorescent lights and everything that's happening in here. You get a few kind of glimmers of light when you're in the cave, like there's some opening that's allowing some light to shine in, and then you get all of the paint that also reflects the light, and then you get some of the fluorescent like algae that's in here. It's really cool. I love just the whole visual style of this game. I think it's really great. The island itself looks very abandoned. It appears to have been abandoned for some time, as the paths are overgrown, the buildings look dilapidated, and you're allowed to just explore all of this and see what's going on. You find things that have been discarded or left behind, and it just gives you this feeling that everything's very old and just run down. And it's been that way for decades. It reminds me a lot of when I would go up north to visit my family's cabin, and you'd be driving along and you'd just see several abandoned homes where somebody had like an idea of what they wanted to do, or that was going to be their new life or something, and whatever happened, something took place, and now the building just sits there abandoned, slowly rotting away. That's kind of how I felt when I was walking through this island and seeing the few buildings that are there that are just completely abandoned. I really do love the visual storytelling in this because it gives you some hints that there's something more to this game than what the player is being told. It reminds me of some of the visual storytelling in like Shadow of the Colossus, where you're seeing all of these ruins and whatnot, and you think that there's something else happening, like something else is going on in that patch of the world, but that's not important for the storytellers to tell you. That's just important for you to try to figure out the lore of that world. It's really kind of cool. And that's similar to how I feel with this, but it's a little bit more overt, where you have all of these different sentences written on the side of mountains or written on cave walls, and you've got the electrical schematics and the different chemical equations, and it's all up to the player to draw some meaning from it. And everybody can draw something a little bit different from what they see. And that kind of brings us to the ending, and we'll talk about just some of the weirder parts of this game. The ending to Dear Esther is really weird. You get some more talk of just what the narrator is experiencing. That's where a lot of the identities for the different people he's talked about start to just blend together. And it makes you wonder who all of these people really are, who the narrator actually is, who Esther is, when this car accident took place, if that's when she died, if she was in the other car and the narrator killed her. It's very weird because he keeps talking about this illness that he has. He talks about how he broke his leg. You don't experience that as the player, so you're not the narrator. Or maybe you were at some point, but you're not now. You hear about how he took all of these letters that he did not send to Esther because she was presumably dead. He sent those out into the water, and you find them while you're walking along. And then you climb up to the top of this tower and you jump off, but you don't die. You sail through the ending. So, what the hell happened? What's going on? Who are you? Who are all of these people? It's a very confusing ending to a game, but you're supposed to draw your own meaning from it. Do you think that your character had died before and now you're just going through this as some sort of, a purgatory or something like that? Or are you drawing some other meaning to it? Or did you just play the game, think it was boring, and then you came to the end and you're like, well, this is stupid and turn it off? Anything could have happened. I found the ending really cool, but maybe somebody else didn't. This is one of those games where I'm kind of unsure how I feel about it. It's incredibly interesting, and I feel like the game has a lot more lore to it than what you get on your first playthrough. It's also a very short game. I got it done in a little under an hour, which means I probably missed some stuff, but there's. How do I want to put this? There is like a mystery to it that I find very compelling. I walked away from the game wondering what it all meant, what I was supposed to get from it, who these people really were, what did I miss that would have probably shed some light on them, and finally, what was the meaning of the ending? I don't think these questions are supposed to be answered. The player is supposed to make up their own mind about them, and each person can have a different interpretation of what's going on. It kind of reminds me of What Remains of Edith Finch in that way, how that game is very vague and the ending is open to interpretation, and you kind of have to make up your own mind about it. There is more that I wanted to talk about just concerning this game. Uh, it will end up in something else, probably, as I just don't really feel it's appropriate for a game review or anything like that. I think this is a fascinating game, and it made me think about a lot of what was going on. But yeah, it is just a walking simulator, so might not be for everyone. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.